all could please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're spread out here.
Thank you all for coming to the Board of Trustees Public Work Session on March 8th. We're missing a couple of individuals here that are on vacation, so they will be back. And as usual, we got the Employee of the Month. And this month we have Maurice Espinoza. And I'll read you his recognition form. Maurice is a custodian and maintenance mechanic. And it is written to him, he always has an upbeat, positive attitude, does his work outside his job title, makes sure his job is done right. And when a fellow worker was injured on the job, the stage at Southampton Arts Center, Mauricio jumped into the action, taking the lead and finishing the completion of the building of the stage, making it available for an upcoming performance. His date of hire was 3/31/2015. And Maurice, we thank you very much for all that you've done and helped out. And good picture.
Photographs well.
Thank you.
Steve, do you want to get this? Sure. Thank you.
We have the public comment. Chris Coy.
Good evening. My name is Chris Coy from Barnes Coy Architects in Bridgehampton on Montauk Highway. Just wanted to comment in support of the intent of the new local law concerning the GFA limits in the village. Barnes Coy has been here for over 25 years, as you may know, designing houses. And we think that it's important to not kill the golden goose. It's important to maintain the character of the village, and we, even though we're architects, we're behind lowering the GFA because we think that it does help maintain the character of the village by limiting the mass and bulk. And we don't think it does any damage because we think that it's really design that's important, not just size. So, for example, if you have R20, you'd be allowed to do a 3,500 square foot house. And in 3,500 square feet, well designed, you can have a 4 or 5 bedroom house with maybe even a study, in a nice public space and a large kitchen. And, we do this all the time. So we don't see the hardship. And we just wanted to throw our support as professionals behind this intent.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I would just indicate that if anybody else wants to comment on one of the public hearings, they do so during that period to make sure it's in the official record.
Somebody sign in or something?
Actually, just...
Depends if you hear what you're here to comment about.
Were you speaking about a public hearing matters or something?
Is there a public hearing?
Yeah.
Is it now?
Yes. So you might want to wait to actually discuss in that. Depends what you're going to discuss.
Are you-
All I want to do is be here for the so-called public hearing part.
Oh, okay, well, that's coming up very shortly.
So you don't have a list for that?
Well, unless you want to make a comment. You're here for the
If you want to
GFA.
comment in the public hearing, then you don't have to sign it.
Oh, okay, sorry.
If you want to speak about the GFA.
Yeah, if you have a comment about the GFA, that's going to be open relatively shortly. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to comment about anything other than that, then this would be the time to do it.
So is there any other comments that you would like to make? For that, board presentations, there are none. Moving to the public hearings, I think this is what you're all here for, is a maximum gross floor area of a dwelling, So I'd like to make a motion to open the public hearing on the maximum gross floor area of a dwelling.
Second? All in favor?
All in favor? Aye. Before we get into that, there is a letter here, Steve, that you were going to read that was presented by Paul Travis.
Sure. Paul, as the chairman of the Southampton Village Planning Commission, dear Mayor Irving and trustees, we received from the village attorney the charts that have been circulated by Eduardo Simeone, a member of the commission, relating to the proposed modifications for residential gross floor area. The commission reviewed the material at its March 1st public meeting. The commission has the following comments. Item 1, the analysis of how accessory buildings are treated had mathematical errors. Our understanding is that Mr. Simeone will issue corrected charts. Number 2, the members of the commission at the meeting, other than Mr. Simeone, believe that the proposed GFA modification is appropriate and best analyzed in the context of the proposed changes to the code. However, if the analysis considers broader issues, it must consider not only how the current code reflects accessory buildings, but also garages, basements, and attics, which would reduce the percentage impact. Number 3, the proposal in front of the trustees is a result of nearly 2 years of planning work, many public meetings of the Planning Commission, and a number of special Saturday workshops in which both local officials and practitioners were invited. We heard from the members of other boards and many architects and practitioners that a reduction in GFA was an acceptable way to address the issue of how larger homes are impacting community character and creating much conflict between neighbors. We also heard that the design and construction community would prefer to have simple-to-follow regulations, and certainly so that they can better plan and advise their clients going forward. Item 4, the data collected clearly shows that homes built in the last 10 years, 2005 to 2015, are considerably larger on average than homes built in the pre-war era. The below chart shows a level discrepancy between currently permitted GFA and existing built condition. A remarkable 72% of all parcels in the village can add at least 30% more area. In general, the optimal planning condition is to match the allowable GFA and setbacks and coverage as closely as possible to average built conditions, particularly in a jurisdiction such as Southampton with a well-defined pre-war built condition which defines its community character as outlined in the comprehensive plan. The village has a significant long-term economic value as a small-town resort community. As the demand for larger houses is pushed to ever smaller lots because of high land values, as stewards we must balance current market demand with 300 years of architectural history in the oldest English settlement in New York State. This is a serious responsibility since the loss of historic fabric and landscape is often irreversible. When there are considerably greater development rights than existing condition, this puts higher pressure on the building department and the ARB, such as we have seen in recent years. And there's 2 charts for redevelopment of soft sites, which should add at least 30% to GFA under current code. Vacant is 219 parcels, which is 8%. Less than 30%, 245 parcels at 9%. 30 to 50%, 809 parcels, 30%. 50 to 70%, 690 parcels representing 25%, and the second chart is less likely to be redeveloped because can add less than 30% GFA under current code, 70 to 100%, 544 parcels representing 20%, and 100%, less than 100%, 201 parcels representing 7%. We hope this is helpful to your review. Sincerely, Paul Travis. There are copies of the letter up on the table if anyone wants to have it for the chart reference.
Thank you, Steve. And maybe council could explain the proposed change?
Sure. Just for the record, I want to indicate on January 24th, I believe, the board also received a letter from the Suffolk County Planning Commission indicating that this is a matter of local jurisdiction. The proposed law has been, as this board has actually scheduled previously in notice, but didn't have complete notice. So we did hear comments at the last board meeting in February 8th, and we're here to hear additional comments. But as was indicated in Mr. Travis's letter, this is something that has been ongoing since 2003 in the village. Amendments to gross floor area, and the village has been monitoring the implementation over that period and has actually amended it 3 or 4 times. More recently, the Planning Commission undertook a study, and some of the comments were incorporated in Mr. Travis's letter, but more importantly in the reports that were submitted to the board. Among the study, they did analyzed a variety of alternatives. And the issues they raise in the letter about including what's included in the gross floor area and what's not included, et cetera, were part of all the evaluations. What came out of it, though, and it was this board's intent to keep the analysis and the ability to enforce as simple as possible. And so the alternative that was chosen by this board to proceed was the alternative of reducing the percentage, the basic formula, which is currently 12% of the lot area plus 1,500 square feet. That applies in all residential zones. In the smaller zones, however, there is a whole formula as to what additional accessory structures are excluded from or included in the gross floor area calculation and thus must be taken into account. The proposed amendment, as recommended by the Planning Commission as one of the alternatives, is to change that 12% of lot area plus 1,500 square feet to 10% of the lot area plus 1,500 square feet. It doesn't change the calculation in the smaller zone of what's included or excluded. That stays the same. So that is essentially the amendment.
Thank you. I just want to say that we've, over the past few years, when we did height and lot modifications and pyramid laws, that this was always on the back burner as the final look at controlling size. The one thing that I personally have is in concern is that particularly on the smaller lots, a lot of these lots are owned by older people that are looking at facilities for retirement and additional income for retirement. And I hate to see them to be penalized. Although I think on a small lot in the 7.5s, it's only about 150 feet, which is a minimal amount. And I've spoken with Paul, and we're also looking at on the smaller lots, the 7.5s, is not to have the zoning start on that, but starting on the larger lots. And maybe, Paul, you could come up and make a comment on.
My name is Paul Travis, member of the Southampton Village Planning Commission. I also just want to note that Eduardo Simeone, Laura DeVinny, Joe McLaughlin, and Mark Schifford from the Planning Commission are also here tonight. Yes, so I guess I want to make two comments. One is, as the mayor said, this is the final piece of a effort to do a comprehensive review of the zoning text that started about 2.5 years ago at the request of the then mayor and trustees, and Glennis Berry, who did the study for us, is here. This was the first time we were able to access the town's GIS and get a comprehensive view of what had been built in the village from basically the 1880s until 2015. And it was that fact pattern which led to the changes that we've proposed. As the mayor said, what we had thought, when we looked at the range of options on GFA, was that most of the zoning changes that had been done over the last 15 years really had focused on the smaller zones and an attempt to control development in the smaller zones. But what we were seeing and what became clear from Glynis's report was really a large part of what we had missed was the really significant change in size of houses in the larger zones. So the commission thought if we're going to make a change, we should make a change that was much more equitable to the smaller zones and really had the bigger impact in the larger zones. And that's why we decided to change the percentage instead of the square footage. As was noted, the change is very small. It ranges from 50 feet to to 150 feet, up to a lot of 7,500 feet. There are other parts of the zoning text that I believe mean that that change really has no impact, because there are other things that constrain the lot at that size. But I think if we think that is something which I think we do understand is something that we don't want people in smaller zones to feel they're not going to be able to build a reasonable house. One thing I would suggest is the possibility that instead of doing 10 plus 1,500 across all the zones, that we might, for example, look at something like 10 plus 1,650 in the zones below 7,500 feet. So I think we would be open to the idea that perhaps in lots below 7,500 feet, we could amend the formula to give further protection. Thank you, Mayor and Trustees.
And thank you for all your work and all the board for all their work. Anybody else with a comment? Mark?
Stepping out.
You're stepping in?
You can't go. Get back.
Edward?
I'm back.
Well, that's good. That's a good sign.
My name is Edward Simeoni, also known as Eduardo. I reside at 181 White Street in the village of Southampton, and I am a member of the Planning Commission since 2004. I would like to put the issues in some perspective. There have been presentations claiming that what is being built today is much larger than what was being built a long time ago. The old homes we admire, which add character to the village. The graph showed that on average this was true, but of course on average it would be true. Back then you had a few large homes built by the well-to-do, the remainder were very small homes. Nowadays there are many larger homes being built, therefore of course on average the homes are larger, but in absolute terms not as large as the homes we admire on equivalent lots. It was also claimed by another graph that on average homes being built today are not as large as the zoning will allow. This being used as justification that zoning can be amended downwards, which flies in the face of the claims that everyone builds to the maximum allowed. And although we do build to the maximum allowed, what is being built today is not as large as what was being built in 2006, and not as large as what was being built prior to 2005. Present zoning allows for 12% of the lot plus 1,500 square feet. Between 2005 and 2006, zoning allowed 12% of the lot plus 2,000 square feet. Prior to that, you could build whatever would fit in your building envelope, which meant you could build a 5,000 square foot house on a quarter-acre lot, including an attached garage. In today's zoning, the maximum allowed for the same lot would be 3,000 square feet, excluding the garage. I was involved with the Planning Commission in reviewing zoning in 2004, and I proposed to amend zoning building rights to reflect the size of the lot instead of the zone where the lot was located. This ensured that development rights would be applied based on the size of the lot, not the zone where the lot was located, which went a long way towards solving overbuilding. You may also recall that in 2004, the board majority imposed a moratorium on any construction over 10% of the lot plus 1,000 square feet. And then in 2005, passed zoning and became known as the Bates Law, which called for 10% of the lot plus 1,750 square feet amidst much public opposition. In the 2005 election cycle, the village residents, by their vote, changed the composition of the Board of Trustees, and the zoning was amended to 12% of the lot plus 2,000 square feet. And then in 2006, it was amended again to 12% of the lot plus 1,500 square feet as a compromise. Nowadays, we're being asked to consider a GFA of 10% plus 1,500 square feet, less the square footage of any structure on the property, with the exception of detached garages that was passed last year, which effectively reduces the GFA by several hundred more square feet, depending on what other structures are on one's property. It is also important to understand the composition of the formula. Reducing the formula by 2% may not seem like much, but bear in mind that the percentage affects mainly larger lots. The larger the lot, the greater the reduction. whereas the fixed amount is designed to guarantee a minimum square footage for the smaller lots. Therefore, this reduction of 2% is significant, and in conjunction with the inclusion of accessory structures in the GFA, it is equivalent to the Bates Law on steroids. It's much stricter. The proposal before you will effectively render non-conforming practically all homes built in the last 20 years, and one of the tenets of zoning is to keep non-conformity to a minimum. I have been criticized for using my home as an example, but for me, it's a litmus test as to whether a proposed zoning change is reasonable. I first acquired my property in 1984. It was an 1,800 square foot salt box. Back then, it was surrounded by potato fields. Cooper's Farm Road did not exist, and I actually felt somewhat isolated. For me, this was a weekend in summer residence. The house was brand new but cheaply constructed, not well insulated, but it felt like a mansion. It was my first home. We became full-time residents in 2001, the day following 9/11. At the time, we had 2 young boys, aged 7 and 3. In 2004, my wife was expecting her 3rd child, and the house was becoming tight, so I decided I would enlarge the house. The plans called for a 3,600 square foot house with 5 bedrooms, 1 extra bedroom for guests, mainly mom, maybe a friend here and there. At the time, zoning would have allowed for a 5,000 square foot home based on my building envelope. I followed all the rules. I was conservative in my approach. My basement remains unfinished. I do not have a pool house, just a small shed in which I had the pool equipment installed and which I used for some storage. Nonetheless, if this proposed zoning passes, my property becomes non-conforming, and I would not even be able to enlarge my shed without having to apply to the zoning board. In planning, it's easy to play with formulas. Let's take a bit out here, let's add a little bit there. As our trustees, you must also weigh the consequences. How these changes affect real property owners, reduces property rights and possibly values, makes it hard to make any improvements, or sell a property that no longer has the building rights that meets the expectations of prospective buyers. Please weigh the consequences carefully. At the very least, send this back to the Planning Commission for further review. There may be some space to revisit the zoning of small lots, but a significant wholesale change throughout the village does not, in my opinion, have any merit. Thank you for your attention. I am grateful for this opportunity to express my opinion.
Thank you, Alvaro.
Thank you, Eduardo.
Any other comments?
I have nothing written. Mike Sanjabi. I'm recently contracted to buy a subject property in the village. After I sign contracts, I hear about this new law and regulation that's going on. Whatever the village wants is fine by me, but as someone who's just coming into the village and is in contract, it hurts me by, I believe, 300 square feet, 300 or 400, which is a substantial amount of square footage, and it's going to depreciate the value of the property. If all the residents are for it, I'm for it also. But in terms of people who just purchased the property and trying to get plans approved, I think there should be a grace period of, 6 months turnaround for those in recent contract. I made it short and sweet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any Bonnie?
You could submit that in writing. You could submit.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Cannon, resident 54 Miller Road in Southampton. I'm glad I was sitting back in the back and I asked someone, because when I came in, I asked about comments and I was told that I had to wait till the end to make comments. So I don't know, there must have been a miscommunication. But anyway, I'm here to speak on this particular issue as far as the zoning is concerned. As you all know, I was born and raised here in Southampton. My parents, my grandparents, many of my cohorts and friends and their families have lived in this area for many, many years. When we came here, and I'm specifically talking about a lot of the migrants and people of color, when they came here, they were put in a red line situation, and there was only certain places where we could buy homes, and that was by the railroad tracks or in other areas, and that basically is where you would call the hill or the avenue, and that's where you would find many of your people of color that lived in those areas. Those houses right now, as you know, those houses that we were able to buy were box houses, either ranches, small ranches, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom houses, or 3-bedroom, 1-bedroom houses. My issue, I heard a statement said that, for the smaller zones, you would only lose 150 square feet, or possibly that you would be able to build a reasonable house. Well, what's reasonable? My thing is that as far as this community is concerned, as far as the Hamptons is concerned, the folks that have been on the lower part of the totem pole from the beginning, why would you want to penalize them anymore? I was also told that when you look at the pyramid law of the 12% and the pyramid law that they have right now existing, you would never get a massive house that could be built. My thing is, I understand what it is that you're trying to do, and I understand why you're trying to do it, but I'm saying to you that I think that you need to reanalyze, look at specific areas. Just don't put everybody in the pot, because everybody in the pot is not the same. And if it's not going to make that much of a difference, even if it's 0.5%, don't take away from those individuals if it's not going to make a difference. So that's, the one thing that I have to say on this particular hearing. Why change it if it's not going to make a difference anyway? I'm not saying don't change it in other areas, but I think you need to look at when you have box houses there and you're going to take 1% or 0.5%, it may not mean much to you, but it means much to other people. And when it doesn't have to do, at the end of the day and at your end goal, when you're looking at basically trying to cut down on the massive houses, if it's not even going to ever happen in that area, don't touch it, don't mess with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Bonnie, I'd just say that the Planning Commission is well aware of that situation, and that's why they're looking at the smaller lots very closely, and there's probably going to be an adjustment on that. Yes?
My name's Judy Maisels, and I too live in one of the smaller lots on Pelletreau Street, and I find I'm being smothered by what's being built on the smaller lots. The neighbors' windows are in your windows. The driveways are like in the front of the yard. The houses are coming almost to the street. And then with the privet, Southampton used to be so beautiful because the lawns went from the house to the street with no Belgian brick. You felt space. Now you've got 5 cars parked in the front yards of these houses because you've allowed swimming pools, pool houses, everything else. So I say that the small lots also need to be considered as to what it's doing to the people who live in the smaller houses still surrounded by these monsters.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
I just wanted, it's Glynis Berry. I just wanted to clarify some of the numbers for people so that they understood the actual impact.
Yeah, that'd be great.
For lots that are 7,500 or less, there is no impact because the maximum of 30% is the same, and that applies. No, that's always been, it won't change anything on lots less than 7,500. So right now with the code, you could build a 2,250 square foot home, that's not including basement and attic, and that's the same size as you could build under this code because the 30% applies. Now, if
I'm sorry, what's the 30%? Can you clarify what that, you keep saying 30%, what does that mean so the public knows what you're talking about?
There's a portion of the code that says you can't build more than 30% of the size of your lot, and for the small lots, that's the controlling factor. So, so in that smallest lot, there is no change. Now, lots that are above that, like 12,500, the size of the house would go from 3,000 to 2,750, okay? And lots 20,000, it would go from 3,900 to 3,500. So those really small lots aren't affected at all. And this was introduced to counter the impacts on where people are building now, where they were maximizing pool houses, building, literally the max that they could. And it was changing the environment. So basically, the larger the lot, the more it has an impact under this code.
Thank you. Bonnie, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
The only comment I said is basically...
Well, you got to come
Come on, Bonnie. Come on. You know the rules. You know the rules. You were here before. It's been a while, I know, but it's good to see you back.
Yeah, and basically that's what I was told, that there was minimal impact. But I'm saying, why mess with it if it doesn't do anything?
That's why the Planning Commission is looking at the...
Yeah, just don't. If it doesn't do anything, just leave it as it is and do the rest that you have to do.
Right.
Because it just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, but then just leave it as it is. I like to hear 12% versus 10. I just like to hear 12 is more than 10. So I just like to hear that.
Any other comments? Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, trustees. My name is Fred Weinford. I reside at 45 Roscoe Drive. And just like to make a comment that I really think we are stewards here, and our obligation is to preserve the character of our village. People come here because of the character of our village, and we really don't want to turn it into what people are coming from. They're coming here because of the character. So I would just like to go on the record of saying that I fully support the recommendations of the Planning Commission with respect to the reduction in square footage as outlined in their proposal. I also have a petition here that I went around my neighborhood today in the Roscoe community. And in addition to myself, I have 7 other property owners that support the Planning Commission's proposal with respect to the reduction of square footage. And if I may, I would just like to submit that so it goes on the record. There's 8 of us in total on this, and I have other neighbors that are in Florida right now that I'm sure would be willing to sign this. I think you have another email petition from Robert Smith with respect to this. So just want to go on record that the Roscoe community, at least from the people that I've talked to, do support the proposal. Thank you very much, and I'd like to submit that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fred.
I would just like to say that the 2 houses on either side of me occupy about 80% of the land of the property, not 30%. So I don't know where this 30% comes from, but they don't even need a lawnmower. They could probably use a clipper.
Thank you. Any other comments, Marty?
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Martin Gill Martin. I've lived in Southampton for almost 72 years. Subtract 4 for active duty. This is where I've lived my life. I love this community. And the fact that I'm opposed to this amendment does not change the fact that I love it just as much as you people who are in favor of it. The question is, which way do we go? I believe in zoning, first of all. Let me get that very clear. And I'm also here speaking on behalf of myself. I'm semi-retired. Pam's trying to get me closer and closer to the full retired, and I'm working on it. But I believe in zoning. It's healthy for a community. It's helped us preserve a lot of good things of our town and of our local village. In fact, I'm proud to say my father was very actively involved with the original zoning that was passed for our village. Problem comes up, though, when we just plain can't stop figuring out some way to control everything that people want to do with their property. I have my entire life as an attorney believed strongly in property rights. That may sound contradictory to my position that I am strongly in favor of zoning. We all have to live with reasonable limitations. What happened here about 10 or 12 years ago was an example of a group of people who thought they knew better than anybody else what we should do with our property. They passed some very restrictive zoning laws. At that time, our community reacted to it, and the community at large elected new leadership in our village and reversed that law. And, well, Ed gave a very good summary of what happened after that. What I said then, and I'm sorry Nancy isn't here, because she was one of the people that, came forward at that time. Bonnie was also someone who came forward. And I'm hearing Bonnie, because that's exactly how I feel. I am not convinced that we have to go all the way and do further reduction. I look at the things that are going on in our village, and there are larger and larger homes. I'm not surprised. People want more and more for the dollar that they have. Frankly, my home, when I built it, that I kind of maxed out what I could do on my half acre on Cooper's Farm. I had 4 children, and we wanted a bedroom for each child. And so my house today would be in violation of the new law. I said then, and everybody always kidded me about it, because I'd say, what's wrong with my house? Why don't you like my house? Frankly, I like my house a lot. My wife and I designed it ourselves. We've lived there since 1987. I think it's a wonderful home. I could not build that house again under this new law. And frankly, I don't think my home is any startling. It's certainly not a McMansion. I hate that term, but it's not a huge home. It's a nice sized home. It's an appropriate sized home for a family. It has actually shrunk since my children now got married, and when they come home and I end up with the 8 grandchildren, my granddogs, and my children, that house is not nearly big enough, but that's okay. Fortunately, they only come to visit for a short period of time. I think this is just a wonderful community. Let's not try to micromanage everybody's ownership. I appreciate the fact that the Planning Commission has put a lot of time in on this. I know you've given it a lot of time and thought also. But do we really need it? The people that say, God, I just hate to drive down the street and see those big homes. Well, frankly, don't look. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Marty.
Any other comments? Or?
That's it? All these people?
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Jay Deasing, and I'm a resident of the village at 109 Old Town Crossing. I also agree community character is important, but I think we also have to remember that the environment is really what's essential. And we live in a fragile coastal community, and GFA is a regulation that doesn't just monitor the size of houses. It monitors the environmental impact of those houses. And one of the quotes that Glynis actually made early in the study and I went to virtually every meeting, was that current development pace in our village is unsustainable from an environmental viewpoint. So we can all sit here and say, gee, there's no reason to micromanage and take a little bit out of here and a little bit out of there. But in 20 or 25 years, when we leave our children in an environmental wasteland, who's going to be laughing? Who's going to be thinking that was a great strategy? So I really think that there's an important role that you have as trustees. And we've seen with houses that they are undeniably larger today than they were 10, 15, and 20 years ago. In addition, those houses now have the ability to put an entire suite of rooms in the basement. That didn't happen 20 years ago. And so on a third of an acre, it's not unusual for us to see 7 bedrooms, 7 baths, a pool house, a garage, the pool, and supposedly parking for 6 cars. I think if you consider that property being used as designed, we're gonna drive ourselves out of business. The environment is going to be destroyed here. And I think as stewards of our village, you have a responsibility. And other villages have not taken this path. So if you compare, for example, what East Hampton currently allows on a 7,500 square foot lot, it is 50% less than what Southampton is proposing in this current law. So I think we wanted to talk about perspective in our community. I think that's an interesting perspective. One of our neighbors just down the street has a lovely community. As far as I know, people actually build and sell houses in East Hampton. It hasn't turned into a ghost town. It hasn't turned into a community that can't sustain itself. In fact, I think they've done better because what they've done is they have a variety of homes in their community. What we're doing is we're maxing out on every property, and locals can't afford it. Retirees can't stay here. The cost of maintaining these houses, they can't afford it. So I really think there's other reasons aside just from community visual character. There's real character in our community that we're losing, and it's people that have to be moved away, that can't afford their homes, and they get pushed out by the enticement of a developer who says, look, I'll pay you an extra $200,000 for that house because I know I can max it out and sell it to somebody from the city. And unless we change that, there really won't be much left here in Southampton for locals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Robert Lohman, 28 Bowden Square. I've lived full-time in the Southampton area since the mid-'80s and worked both in real estate and as a designer in the community. The house I have presently appeared in the lot in around 1910. We think it's older, and it's a simple little historic cottage. I've noticed that a number of the newer homes going up on the old streets, like Little Plains and Elm Street and places like that, seem jarring compared to the other houses in the area, and I thought about what's different. And the thing that I've noticed that's changed dramatically in real estate in the last 10 to 12 years is the height of ceilings in houses. And when you push up the ceilings, you make the volume of the structure much bigger. And even though for years all we talked about was coverage, then we added gross floor area, which made a different, then adjusted for the sizes of the living space, but it doesn't address the volume of the space. And it really makes a difference. I mean, my house only has like 7'6" ceilings, and that's why it has that low tucked-in cottagey look. And then you look at the house next door to me that had 9 foot on the first floor and 8 on the second,
and it's like this large box in your face. And I see where houses have been tucked in on the older lots in Elm Street and Pelletreau and Little Plains, and with those 9-foot ceilings or 10-foot ceilings on the first floor, you get this big face on the front of the house that just doesn't fit in our community. So I think that might, even if we did adjust the square footage one way or the other, it may not still get us the result we're looking for to get a harmonious look in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Any other comments? Paul?
Paul Robinson from Little Plains Road. In listening to everybody's comments and listening to the Planning Commission that I viewed on television, listening to the previous board meeting, I sense a passion from everybody. And they're clearly, I think everybody has an opinion one way or the other. That's very passionate. And I commend the three of you for being involved the way you are. I am somewhat concerned, and I wrote a letter to the editor of the Southampton Press. You probably read it. There have been drastic changes that happened over the years. What I remember is like Meadow Lane was a dirt road when I first learned to drive. Thinking about, and I'm looking at Mayor Hattrick, he was involved. Mayor Hattrick. Well, I'm rambling a little bit. But I remember the DuPont estate, which then became the Turpin House, which is now Calvin Klein's property. And it's clearly changed over the years. Beyond that, it was just a dirt road. So my point is, you look at Bill Dunwell's painting behind you on the Lake Agawam, sure looks different there than it does today. The whole community is changing. And I think we all long, I recall again, and I wrote in the press today, I recall when I first learned to drive, and it's many years ago, they were going from Hill Street to where the Princess Diner is. I'd pass 7 gas stations. I would pass 7 car dealerships. None of them are there anymore. Things have changed. And I hear some people with passion say, "Oh, let's stop this growth." But what is missing is the community has constantly changed. Many of the roads today were non-existent. One last point I want to make, which I want to put in perspective. In the last 3 years, there have been 5 changes in the zoning code. 2 of them in the last year. A lot of the houses that appear big, and it's all relative, but I could understand people saying some of those houses are big. They were built under a different code, not the code that's existing today. Typically, when one wants to build a house, they go to the building department, they apply for a code, a building permit, and there's a process. You have to go through the architectural review board, and it takes time. And by the time you get through and you have the house built, could be at least a year. What I'm submitting to you is that the 2 codes that were passed in the last year, they haven't had a chance to come into effect yet. And what I'd like you to give serious thought to is just taking a pause, just pressing the pause button, letting those 2 codes play out a little bit, and take another look in 6 months or a year. If you don't like the new construction, then do something. But I think it may be just a little premature right now.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Yes.
I'm sorry, last comment. On my particular lot, the house size has changed a good 12% when you were talking about the smaller lots. So when it comes to my lot, it's substantial. It's not a small change. And that in turn, if I were to go sell it, would equate to hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference. And also somebody else mentioned the comment about people who want to retire, they won't be able to afford to live here. But there's also the other side of it is, instead of getting, I'm just throwing an example, $1 million for your property, now you're getting $1.5 million. But once the zoning does change, they're not going to get $1.5 million. It's going to go back down. That's all.
Thank you. Anybody else with a comment?
Jim McFarland, Wyandanch Lane. A famous baseball player said, "Deja vu all over again," and here we are. Over 10 years ago, myself and a couple other interested parties started this whole campaign after having been given the impulse by the planning board, which created the master plan. From the master plan, we then evolved some criterion for changing the zoning. One thing we did do is a scientific academic research into what was here, what was built already. And we did a statistical analysis, and almost identical to the analysis that the Planning Commission has yet evolved 10 years later. We came up with this formula that has been mentioned tonight. It was in the 10, 15, 10, 16, I don't even remember the numbers anymore, it's been so long. But why did we do this? We did this because when we came here, we found this place to be charming, delightful, and deserving of being preserved pretty much the way it was when we got here. Now, I guess that's a curmudgeonly approach to something, and it has nothing to do with making money and trying to build as many square feet that you can. Tom Wolfe wrote a book about Atlanta, and in this book, he discussed various things. People own meat markets and warehouses, and one of them was a builder. And the builder was quoted in the book saying, "I always build big entryways because they cost virtually nothing to build, and I can add that square footage into my overall price." And I won't accuse the entire building community of doing that, but it sure looks that way to me. Now, the size proposed, I think, is pretty close to what we should have. Even then, it's going to make a big house. I hope Jay Deasing will excuse me when I mention his house. It's on the corner of Toilsome, Old Town Crossing, and Wyandanch, and it's 2,200 square feet. Am I correct, Jay? And when you look at that house, Bonnie, if you drive by there, Bonnie, you'll say, how could I put that big of a structure on a 7,500 square lot? And the 7,500 square lot would take a 2,250 square foot house. Value. The question of value keeps coming up over and over again. Well, let's see. How can we expand Southampton so we can make more lots for the speculative builders? I can't think of a way unless we fill in the bay, or maybe that part just north of Dune Road, and then we can get a lot of great waterfront property in there. But otherwise, we only have so much property. And the people coming here to purchase homes, most of them appear to be second homeowners, because even where's Marty? A lawyer starting up now wouldn't be able to afford to live in the village unless he got some of the more prominent lawyers' clients, or whatever you call them. Anyway, we control this market, we citizens and taxpayers and voters, and we can say, you know, this is the way we want it. And if you come here and you want to live here and you can't put the house you want on the lot you found, then you have to find a bigger lot. That's all there is to it. I can't feel sorry for someone who's coming here and hasn't been here and hasn't been in the fire department or volunteered at the church, who just wants to speculate in our property. Now, we control the place, and we can do what we want to, and I encourage you to follow the Planning Commission's advice. The small lots are covered. They can't build too big on those. There's an academic question or point here. We have some fairly heavy academic people in this room. Martin Gill Martin is one of them, and I respect his brain. But maybe his perspective is just a teeny bit off, because there was a couple doctors at the Randolph-Macon University who did a study of this very topic, and they found that houses in a controlled area were worth more than houses in the uncontrolled area. Just happens to be a fact. Okay, the code, what's the code? The code is the starter for this whole process, and it's only meant to establish guidelines. It doesn't have to, it's not cast in concrete, we all know that. Yeah, but it's discouraging people who come here and want to build big and out and and ugly as far as they can. And if they can't do that because their property has some unusual shape or size or location, the Zoning Board of Appeals has been created just for that particular reason. The code is only a guideline. The board helps control the anomalies, and that's about the rest to it. The system is there. It's been working for decades, and we have this wonderful commission which has done a lot of intellectual and footwork, and we have to support them, and I'm for this change, although it's hardly going to change anything. It's so small. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
My name is Jeff Hull. I reside at 71 Leland Lane in Southampton. I appreciate all the time that you guys have put in on this, and it's been an ongoing saga for a long time, I think 16 years now. There's just a couple things that aren't addressed in this that kind of bewilder me, and it's kind of been brought up that everyone's worried about the size, right? Is that what we're talking about, size? Well, there's volume. Volume meaning what he was just saying, the double height foyers and the volume of the houses. If you go into what was my parents' old house, which was torn down, we had 8-foot ceilings on both floors, okay? Today, there, as Robert Lohman spoke earlier, you have 10-foot ceilings on the first floor, 9-foot ceilings or 10-foot ceilings on the second floor. So what you're seeing is volume, mass. That's not being addressed. And I've always said, we did the pyramid law, which I thought was a great law. But I still think that we need some sort of height, because if we bring down the height, the volume will decrease. It might still be a 2,500 square foot house, but it won't be this way. It'll be smaller in mass. And no one's addressing that. And and maybe Paul can comment on this when you're done, but the houses that you see that are going up, it might not be the actual square footage that's off. Maybe it's the volume and the height. And I just don't understand why no one's addressing this, because Mrs. Maisel said she goes to her house and she's got a wall of glass next to her. And that's true. It's because they're building, it's the mass, it's the height. And no one's taking this into consideration. Everyone's saying it's the size of the house. Well, the size is two things. It's the square footage and the height. And everyone's saying it's the size. Well, it might be, but if you bring down the volume, the actual cubic feet of the interior, it could really address what a lot of people here are looking for, but also give people that want that extra bedroom the space they need and want, especially in the smaller zones. Now, if you said, I actually built a house about 7 years now in the village, and my ceilings in most of the house are 8.5 feet, and if you look, my ridge height is 26.5 feet. I have 18,000 square foot lot. If you look at my house, and if you had done 10-foot ceilings and 10-foot ceilings, you would say it's a McMansion. If you drive by my house today and say it's a McMansion, you don't know architecture, in my opinion. So why don't we address this volume issue? Why is it always the number of, why can't we give the person the bedroom they want and somehow take the size down? So that's my main point. The second point I'd like to make is we've passed a bunch of zoning over the last couple of years, and what I'm finding is with the way the zoning's written, that you have to have so many parking spaces, and they have to be paved. So now you have all these, we don't have front yards anymore. You drive down the street, these small streets, and they're all paved over. No one's addressing this. I know everyone's trying, but I'm speaking the fact, and if you'd like to, I'd be glad to take any of you in my car and drive you around, but I don't think you need to do that. You all see it, and so do they. So you try again. Here's a law that you passed that you said the houses are too big. We'll change it by making them. They don't care. They're just going to put parking in the front or put parking wherever they want. But again, if we take the volume down, you're trying to pass all these laws to get to the point you want to get to, but it's actually going against us and making it worse by having paved areas and things like that. Thank you for your time. There are definitely corrections that need to be made, in my opinion. But I just think that there's got to be a better way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Paul, maybe you could address that, because we have done height and we have done.
I would say, I appreciate all the comments tonight. These are very difficult issues. I think in the Planning Commission in Southampton, we have tried very hard to strike a balance between understanding there is a market and there are houses that people want to live in, and changing the zoning is not going to change that. And on the other hand, really trying to do what we can to preserve the community character, which is the overall character that creates such enormous property value and quality of life for everyone who lives there. So we did this study, I think, really trying to change, the way everyone had talked about it, and really base it on the facts, and try to work backwards from the facts to see what we should be doing to really try to, I would say, control growth, not stop growth. The trustees over the last 2 years, both the last mayor and the current mayor, have made a number of changes in the code at the request, or I would say at the recommendation, of the Planning Commission. Just picking up on what I think maybe Mr. Gill Martin said before, or Mr. Robinson, many of those changes I don't think we're fully seeing the impact of yet. Because really the process of building a house, it takes a while. We've made a number, we changed the setback law, for example, in a significant way. I should say you did. And I don't think we've seen the impact of that yet, because very few houses have been built yet that really follow that setback law. That's the first thing I think that's going to begin to change things. We now, I think in the last 6 months, you applied the pyramid law across all lots. Again, that's going to begin to change the nature of the houses we see on the bigger lots, what we've seen in the last few years. So there's been a number of other changes we've made. As someone said, I think there's been 6 separate changes over the last 2 years. Again, I think we haven't fully seen the impact of those, and I think some of the issues that Mr. Willoman and Mr. Hull had brought up, which are, I think, very smart and very wise, I think we'll see some impact. And I do think there is some merit to trying to see what happens, and whether that begins to create a better house than we've seen to date. I think this last change, really, and it really is in our mind the last change, is to try to bring the size of houses more in the context of the streets that they're on. This is a much more, even with all this, I think as a whole in the planning commission, we've made a decision there should be more permissive zoning, for example, than the Village of East Hampton, because our village is a different type. We've had a history of larger houses. They don't have to the same extent in East Hampton. So we've tried to take a middle road. I think, the price of taking middle road is you get a lot of heat from both sides, inevitably. But I really do think this is an attempt to take a middle road. It's not going to stop big houses from being built. What we're hoping, I think, and maybe the way to finish this, is that these are better houses that have been built in the last 10 years. And that people who live on our streets, like I do and everyone else does on the Planning Commission, will feel that the houses fit in better than they have in the past. So thank you, and thank you for your work. I know this is, as difficult as for us, it's a lot more difficult for you, so we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Any other comments? Any comments from the Planning Commission? Any of you?
Mark Schiffer. I'm on Wooley Street and on the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mark, too, for all your...
Okay, well, welcome. And it's been a difficult endeavor to review this. I mean, we have not been able to reach a full consensus. But I think that we also are getting a tremendous pressure from a lot of residents who want us to do something about the size of the houses. And although we're all for property rights are also involve the rights of the neighbor and how much is going to impact onto our property. So it's a balance, and I think that we've come up with various, we've studied and analyzed various possibilities on how to satisfy everybody. And I think this reduction on the GFA, on the size of the house, we thought was a fair and equitable way to address the issue. I think that some of the comments today are really welcome. I'd like to invite you all to come to our meetings and share your concerns and share your ideas, and maybe even bring new ideas that we could incorporate into the proposed regulations. But I think that there's no question that something needs to be done. I'm on Wooley Street, and I see that I can just see my neighbor building a new house, and I really don't think I would like a similar house that was being built down the street. We're going to lose complete privacy, and I think there's a quality of life. And although this gentleman here was mentioning about his concern about the value of the property, I think that although it's a valid concern, we have to look at who lives in the village, and for the ones who live in the village, I think quality of life is what's important, more than if we just are able to build a few more square feet on the property. So, and I thank you so much for your support. And okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Hi, Regina Grieven, Ox Pasture Road. I think it's a very difficult endeavor that you people have to go through right now, but I think it's well worth it, because even on small lots, if the architect knows what he's doing, he can do a beautiful house without infringing on the neighbors and getting the amount of space they want without making the house look like it's totally out of proportion. So architecture is extremely important. And as far as values going down, I don't think it's going to work if everything is overbuilt, because it's been proven too many times in the past. Less is more, which means that your values will go up if the houses are better looking and not so overcrowding and not infringing on your neighbors, because people don't really want to buy in a community like that. They come in, they see, they say, bye-bye. So I think it's important to get the right architect and get it and work from there. And then I'm sure someone can come to a very happy conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments from the trustees? Yes?
Good for right now. Thanks.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear. Public.
We're going to keep this public hearing open, but I just want to say that there were some great comments that were presented to the board. We talked about mass, we talked about size. I think Paul really directed the thought pattern is that the last few zone code changes that we've done haven't really taken effect in the village. Mr. Hull talked about the huge mass. Well, we reduced the height, we put in the pyramid law, we changed the side lots, and I think going forward you won't see those houses. So, this board here is listening to what you say, and we're trying to effectively make our villages attractive and as beautiful as we can without infringing on people's property rights. And again, we looked at the small lots. We realized that the difference is really insignificant on the small lots, and we're going to leave those alone. And we've looked at the big lots, which have been, or the larger lots, I should say, which have been the most impactful in recent years. Was somebody put their hand up that wanted to make a comment? Oh, Howard.
Laura Davini, I sit on the Planning Commission. I was just going to say that in regards to the zoning changes that have been made most recently and that they haven't really seen the impact, that this last proposal, this last recommendation, they all work together. So it's not like the other ones stand alone. It's like it's a whole piece. So that's why this one is the last piece, as Paul said, and they all work together. So that's important to understand. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, as I indicated, I'd like to keep this hearing open, so I'd like to adjourn it to, what's the next?
March 20th.
March 20th meeting? So I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting to March 20th meeting?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
I was going to say, it would be great if you could submit that to the record.
Thank you, Eduardo. This reminds me when I first got elected, what the boardroom looked like at the meetings. Thanks, Jeff.
Let's get them all out of the room before the next. Get them out of the room for the next.
Everybody's just visiting.
None of you want to stay for?
Thanks, Ben.
So we only take comments in writing.
Just wanted to say that.
Thank you for sending that to me.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye, everybody.
They're taking already double spaced.
I guess no one's remaining for the other stuff, which is fine. Let everybody clear out of here.
Betty, can you comments out there? How you doing, Jesse? How's it going? Are you playing video games?
That's what I'm doing.
You forgot to sign out.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, do that again. Do that again.
You're all allowed to stay, you know?
The only comment I didn't understand was Glynis with the 30%. I don't understand what that is.
Kind of
talking about lot coverage?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, lot coverage. You want to do 30% of your lot? Hold on.
Yeah, I don't know where that number came from.
That's why I was kind of asking.
Because she had the 65 that you got to leave open, 65%.
Yeah, but lot coverage wouldn't affect.
Thank you all for staying.
You guys have enough room?
Continuing.
Not a lot left.
Yeah. Continuing on the public hearings, we have a public hearing on local law tax cap override. So I'd like to make a motion on opening the local law on the tax cap override.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Maybe you could explain that, or?
Sure.
We do this every year.
You know, for the last couple of years, we've been dealing with the tax cap limit with regard to the budget, which we've never pierced. It's a floating 2% subject to various other factors. This law is just being adopted for the possible proposal that we might pierce that tax cap. It would allow us to pierce the tax cap. There's no plan to pierce the tax cap, but it's just a recommended practice by New York State and NICOM that we do this. Once we pass the budget, this law will be rescinded.
Do we have any public comment on this law? No public comment? Council, do you advise that we read this law? Or
into the record?
I think it was read last time, wasn't it?
Do you need to read it? You don't need to read it into the record, but I think you close the hearing.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to close the hearing on the local law on the tax cap override.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
We just need a roll call vote. Trustee Yaz?
Aye.
Irving?
Aye.
Trustee Hattrick?
Aye.
Okay. This would be, that's for the closing of the hearing, correct?
Right, correct.
Sorry?
That's for the closing of the hearing?
Yeah.
No, Mike,
Notice of adoption.
notice of adoption, right?
That's what I want to make clear.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, and last one.
The last public hearing we have is amending residency requirements for appointed officers. I'm surprised nobody stayed for that. The purpose that
We just need a motion to open.
I'll make a motion to open the amending residency requirements for appointed officers.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The purpose that we did this is it's becoming more and more difficult because the village has changed and the year-round residents have changed in the village, and it is becoming very difficult to find people to serve on the various boards. So we're taking a look at reaching outside the limits of the village. There are a number of individuals that own businesses in Southampton Village, and they are excluded from serving on some of these boards, and we're hoping to reach out to them to be part of our village and part of the serving on the board. Do we have any public thought on that? Bonnie? Thank you, by the way.
Hi, this is Bonnie Cannon, 54 Miller Road, Southampton, New York. I think that before you move to do something as that you should do everything in your power to look for appointments within the village. This village has been here. I was born and raised here. I think the local people, should have a, say, and I think that there are people that would that you can find that are living here in the village to be appointed for these boards. I think that maybe there should be some type of recruitment. We should start looking at some of our younger individuals, start, getting them ready for, possibly the ones that are staying here. But to go outside of the village, I just off the cuff, I do not think that that's a good idea. I really don't think that that's a good idea. I would like to see more things done to try to look at people that actually are residents here in the village. It's always been done that way. So that's my initial comment.
Thank you. Just so it's understood that just because we amend this doesn't mean that we have to go outside the village. Any comments from trustees?
Well, yeah, there's been discussion, and I think it was even discussed back when you were on the board. I mean, and I understand your sentiment. We agree a lot on as far as, yes, what's local should stay local and decide local, and I get all that. However, the mayor has pointed out, and the previous mayor pointed out, it is tough. I like your recruitment idea. That's great. I think there's ways we can do that, but it has been tough for him and the one before him to find people. That I know. So with that, it was proposed that we expand, and all it does is gives the ability to, doesn't mean you have to. And more than likely you won't, but it gives the ability to. And it's usually a lot of the other boards, like the planning board and the ARB and so forth. And I think there's also been with all the controversy these boards get involved with, quite honestly, I almost find a lot less interest to get involved because these people are getting their heads handed to them on a regular basis. So I think there's a few reasons why people aren't as interested. It's not just whether they exist or not, but the ones that are here. Some people just don't want to step up. And then if people want to get involved, we're pretty easy to find here. You know that. If anybody wants to get involved, there's a man right there. Right? Step up. Well, that's not true. But there's ways, it's no. If you want to step up, we advertise, we say it here. So, but I like the recruitment idea, which I think is something to probably, keep in mind before we do go out. So that's just a little backstory to that. It's not a new concept, I think, but that's kind of where it is getting tougher to fill these seats.
Bill?
Something you might consider is just to take a little time to do this. I think currently all our boards have a full complement, right, with your recent appointments and so on, so we're not under the gun. But I also appreciate why you're doing this, And I think, I keep going back to the 2010 census, which Southampton Press printed that great page, which I gave you copies of months ago. And it showed that in that 10-year period ending in 2010, the year-round white population declined just over 20%. The year-round African population declined over 40%. And I really think in the last 7.25 years that the pace has accelerated. I would love to know what does a house cost in, let's say if it's on a quarter of an acre or a half an acre. I don't know anybody who has bought a home here in the last 10 years who has children, works here, and so on. The things that used to be common, it was an all local village. Now, I think we're getting to the point where, and the people that you do have that live here on a year-round basis are, we could change the name of the village to Rip Van Winkle Town or something like that, where everybody's, the average age of a village resident is really getting up there. And we've got to, we've just had this avalanche of people. I was in the city 3 months ago for the first time in probably 10 years, and I hope it's the last time ever. And I realized just, we think Hill Street has traffic and Hampton Road has traffic. Honest to God, this is the most terrifying experience, and just everything goes up. And I think people, when they live, it's almost like they're cave dwellers in a sense, and all of a sudden they come out here and they can have they can have 7 bedrooms on a third of an acre and all the things the litany that Jay was contending with on his street and so on. I think you're going to have to do this whether you like it or not. And I know darn well that you are going to turn over heaven and hell not to do it. But you just get to the point, and I know that if they don't live here, you'll probably hope that maybe you're getting somebody that has some tie to the village. They work here but don't live here and so on. But we are, honestly, success has killed the Hamptons, and as far as year-round residents, and it's terrifying to. I just go to my house on Hill Street. I bought it in 1963 for $20,500, and was scared silly that I wouldn't be able to make the mortgage payments, which included the taxes and the insurance on the house, and over $125 a month. And I do have 4 children, 2 that live in the village and 2 that live in Tuckahoe, and I hear them telling me what their payments are and so on. They pay that a day, what I used to pay a month, and I owned the thing in fairly short order. Anyhow, I think the gun is to your head, so I appreciate your desire to do this, and I trust you implicitly to turn over heaven and hell to avoid having to resort to it. But I think it's nice to have what almost it becomes a necessary evil, to broaden the fishing bed that you can go in. So I'm against it in one hand, but I recognize that it's what you do when you run out of options.
I'll just add to that, Bill, that as we shrink in the local community, a lot of the children and offspring of people who were village residents haven't necessarily left the area, and they still have a deep heart for the village, but they've moved into North Sea, Hampton Bays, Springs, and so forth. And reaching out to them, they still have a love for Southampton Village.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of people in the surrounding areas, so I don't think we lose a lot of that. The other difficulty that we've been running into is that a lot of the ethics codes in the state of New York have changed, and it's very difficult to find individuals that live in the village that don't have some kind of conflict on serving on those boards. So you take those 2 items and you combine them together, and we ran an ad on the last appointment that we had, and very surprisingly, we did end up with 6 individuals. We interviewed 6 individuals. 2 of those individuals sent us letters after the interview and said they really weren't interested. So we did end up with 4 people that were possibilities, but my fear is going forward that we're going to have less and less, because often I sat with Mark and we ran an ad, and we may have gotten 1 person, and I think on several occasions we sat there waiting for an interview and nobody came in. So it is difficult.
Yeah, no, I think you are running out of options, and this is all it is. It's an option. It's not something you'd like to do or prefer to do. But
Nor is it something that you need to do. You can draw from the village, but it would give us the opportunity to reach outside.
on the ARB, I don't know how many months it took you to fill that spot, but for quite a while there were
Yes,
with
it
4
did.
members, and that's not the best situation in the world either.
Yep. No, it is. It's becoming more difficult. But in any event, I'd like to leave that open because, one, I don't think people realized that issue, and 2, we have a limited amount of board. So I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this until the March 20th meeting.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. The ladies are coming back, right?
Yes, they are.
For the
I
summer?
didn't scare them away.
For the summer?
They're out celebrating National Women's Day. Today?
Okay, we have 1 communications to the board from Christine Scalera from the town. Dear Mayor Irving, the Board of Trustees, I would like to thank you in advance for your consideration in allowing the town and Purist Magazine to hold the 5th annual Kids Beachcomber Beach Cleanup at Cooper's Beach on Saturday, August 25th from 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Each year we have held this cleanup at beaches all over the town of Southampton, and to be able to hold this annual event at Cooper's Beach this year would be a great addition. I started this event with Allie Wentworth in 2014. She and her daughters approached me about doing something to give back to the community they enjoy every summer together. We created this Kids Beach Cleanup for residents and visitors to the East End. We are fortunate enough to have Purist Magazine as a sponsor this year, and I would also like to thank the village to co-sponsor the event at Cooper's Beach as well. Again, I thank you in advance for your consideration and look forward to hearing from you.
This is, I think it's a great project that they do. They've done this in other parts of the town. They've never done this in the village. I full well realize that we've always made an attempt at Cooper's Beach not to have an event held there. But in this particular case, the Southampton Village would be hosting them, and it's a very good, worthy cause for a cleanup on the beach, because really Cooper's Beach, that's the essence of what they would be doing. So I think it's a very positive thing, and I'd like to make a motion. I don't think on the 25th that there is any conflicting issues.
Just lots of sun.
Lots of sun. Lots of sun, and hopefully
4 to 5:30, so end of the beach day.
yeah, and hopefully a lot of kids and residents and visitors that will be there willing to do a pickup, because it can get a little messy down there. So I'd like to make a motion to accept their use of Cooper's Beach on August 25th from 4 p.m. to 5:30.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolutions, item 1, resolved that the reading of the minutes for the work session of February 20th, 2018 be dispensed with, and those minutes be accepted as filed by the village administrator. The actions taken at that meeting be and hereby are ratified and approved. Have a motion?
Make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Item 2, resolved that the claims to the warrants dated March 8th, 2018 totaling $1,051,310.64, warrant 16 general fund, $491.32 warrant 10 expense trust fund, $23,972.50 warrant 10 capital reserve fund in the village payrolls for the period from February 16, 2018 to March 1st, 2018 be audited and approved. Got a motion?
Make that motion.
Second? Second. Discussion, page 1, Allied Systems Integrated, service contractor at PD, $6,480. Atlantic Salt, 206 tons of salt, $16,148. Barnwell House of Tires, tires for the garage, $3,206.59. Bartlett Tree Experts, pruning the crepe myrtles, $4,055. Page 2, Buzz Chew, Chevy and Olds, parts for the garage, $4,821.09. Tom Campbell, ambulance medical reimbursement, $1,000. Carrier Corporation, HVAC repair for the Hampton Road Firehouse, $8,795. Cast Production Video Services for February, $2,305. Cintas First Aid and Safety, first aid supplies for the various locations, $1,051.51. Cook Marin and Associates, going on to page 2, $465,634.61. Renewable insurance for the village. Corazini Asphalt Paving on Halsey Neck, $23,500. I just want to make a note, this was paid for by National Grid, because they're the ones that tore up the road there. So it's full reimbursement. CSA Employment Benefit Fund, March premium, $28,468.44. Bottom of the page, First Presbyterian Church, going on to page 4. March lease for the parking lot, $3,000. Fundamental Business Services, collection services for February, $1,908. General Code Publishers, E-Code Maintenance, the building inspectors, $1,195. Page 5, Herrick Hardware, supplies for the building department, $1,336.60. Indianapolis Marriott Downtown Fire Department Conference, $12,220.65. Island Tech Services, a laptop and computer maintenance agreement for the fire department, $3,071.27. Page 6, Johnson Electrical Construction Corp., traffic signal maintenance for February, $1,400. Donna Kradenborg, ambulance medical reimbursement, $1,000. Mayday Communication, radio repair for PD, $1,560. Page 7, Moore Medical Corporation, ambulance supplies, $5,212.51. Morgan Auto Supply, garage parts, $3,199.15. National Grid, bills for February, $8,598. Nelson Pope and Voorhees, bills for Planning Board and the Zoning Board for February, $14,511. Norsec and Son Carting, $6,532. Tara Oliver, Court Conference, $1,238.72. Page 9, Optimum Cable bills, $1,665.90. Penwell EMS Today, Fire Department Conference, $6,090. Pitney Bowes Global Financial, mail costs for the Fire Department, Village Clerk, and the Court, $1,179.99. PSE&G, collection services for February, $28,125.81. Revco Building supplies for the Building Department, $2,892.53. And Riverhead Building supplies, $3,384.22. Rosemore Construction, paving the O'Connell parking lot, $96,845. Sadie Levine and Chiaco, payment of the balance of the audit fee, $19,883.33. Michael Solomon, Court Conference, $1,115.10. Southampton Fire Department, reimbursing conference expenses, $6,522.37. Page 12, Sprague Operating Reserve, 3,100 gallons of gasoline, $5,514.28. Suffolk County Water Authority for February, $1,639.92. Suzanne Hand and Associates, transcription services for the two actions on 550, 554 Hill Street and 472 First Neck Lane, $7,384. Testing Unlimited annual ladder testing for the fire department, $1,900. Page 13, Vince Toomey, legal fees for January, $3,536.41. Town of Southampton dumping fees, $19,761.29. Trius Inc. garage parts, $3,721.17. Vehicle tracking solutions, GPS for February, $1,291.66. Verizon Wireless, phone bill for February, $2,744.44. Village of Southampton transfer to the capital reserve, $175,000. WG Maintenance, boiler maintenance for the fire department, $2,523.50. WB Mason office supplies for the various locations, $1,643.62. Roy Wines Fire Department volunteer medical reimbursement, $1,000. And Ken Zay reimbursed for parts purchased for the garage, $1,226.86. Last warrant is the Capital Reserve, U.S. Industrial Corp. This is mezzanine work at 470 Hampton Road. This is actually a replacement check for the check that was lost, $13,972.50. And Jeff Butler worked for the ambulance barn for architectural services, $10,000. Further discussion? All in favor? Item 3, resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves that with respect to the village general election to be held on Friday, June 15th, 2018, the polling place shall be at the Levitas Center, Cultural Center of Southampton, Pond Lane, Southampton, New York, and the polls shall be open from 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 4, resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the attached schedule of budget transfers to eliminate overages for the period ending March 8, 2018. Got a motion?
So moved.
Second? Discussion. Item 1, $6,475 out of workers' comp, with $4,400 going into Justice Court miscellaneous, and $2,075 into auditor. $65,000 coming from Trustees Special Project, with $40,000 going into police holiday vacation pay, and $25,000 into police contractual. And the last one is $15,000 coming from street maintenance supplies, $15,000 from street maintenance fuel, $30,000 going into street maintenance contractual. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item 5, whereas the Village of Southampton here in the village is proposing a series of drainage improvements to an existing closed drainage system for the purposes of improving water quality at the system's existing outfall at Agawam Lake, here in after the proposed action. And whereas the village has retained VHB Engineering, Surveying, and Landscaping Architecture PC to review the proposed action, the State Environmental Quality Review Act and its implementing regulations at 6 NYCRR Part 617, and to make a recommendation to the village as to the proper classification of the proposed action. And whereas the proposed action specifically includes a series of drainage improvements to an existing closed storm drainage system at 3 locations within the village, including the O'Connell Drive parking lot, West End, Job's Lane between Main Street and O'Connell Drive parking lot, a Meeting House Lane at Oak Street for the purposes of improving water quality at the system's existing outfall at the lake. And whereas pursuant to 6 NYCRR Section 617.5 C5 and 11 of the implementing regulations of the State Environmental Quality Review Act, street openings and right-of-way openings for the purpose of repair or maintaining of existing utility facilities and the extension of utility distribution facilities, including gas, electric, telephone, cable, water, and sewer connections, to render service in approved subdivisions or in connection with any action on this list are Type 2 actions. Therefore, be resolved that the village, as lead agency, after review of the action proposed at 3 locations within the village mentioned above, 6 NYCRR Section 617.5, and the opinion provided by VHB Engineering, Surveying, and Landscaping Architecture PC, hereby determines that the proposed action is a Type 2 action pursuant to 6 NYCRR Section 617.5, C5, and 11 of the implementing regulations of the State Environmental Quality Review Act, will therefore be definition have no adverse impacts on the environment. You have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Steve, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Is there a subsequent action on the part of the board? Do we have to authorize drainage funding?
No, we've already done that. This is part of a grant that this procedural, just what Jen Messiano needs to apply for this. Item 6, resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the bid from Quogue Catering Company in the amount of $42,750 to operate the concession at Cooper's Beach for the 2018 season. Can I have a motion?
Moved.
Second? Second. Discussion. This is one bid we received on the concession this year. Quogue Catering Company, there's a letter from recommendation from Peter Sartoris, who's the mayor of East Quogue, and the owner of Quogue Catering Company is Larry Hoffman, who also runs the Dockers Restaurant on Dune Road in East Quogue. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 7, resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves Christopher Olzak as a probationary member of Hook and Ladder Company 1, effective March 8th, 2018. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye. Continue on, there being no discussion items, we have comments from board members. Trustee Skremski?
Yeah, just want to mention a few things along the public safety line. It's been an interesting past week. As Kimberly Allen texted me, she's like, hell of a week, 2 nor'easters and a lockout. So first off, I want to thank our first responders, our fire department, and our volunteers, ambulance. With storm activity, nor'easters comes increased volume. The one a week ago, Friday, there actually was a save from the Southampton Fire Department, a motorist over near National Golf Links, got caught in some rising waters coming off the bay there, and was trapped. So that was actually a good save. and amongst other things and calls and a typical. Yesterday's nor'easter brought back-to-back vehicle accidents along various roads. So it was, we've been very busy. So again, I commend them for what they do, as always. And Monday brought an interesting scenario. It's been written about in the newspaper, and it's been elaborated by the police department, so I have no problem in talking about that. But I was there watching it unfold. I was there personally witnessing, what our police department, with their activity, what they were doing, watching them in motion and how they've used all their training and what they've done. And actually, as more importantly, I observed what the public and how the public received it, and the families and the children and so forth. It's the people were questioning in the beginning why we were the one department and the one school district that reacted the way we did. We did have, certainly at the time, and even discovered after the fact, the most extreme presence and reaction to it as a school district and as a municipality and police department, because there was a blanket warning issued by the county, but as has been now reported by the paper as well, that coincidentally or incidentally, there was another situation at the police department. The South Hampton Village Police Department was simultaneously investigating, so they exercised extreme caution, combining a couple of these events and tips. So that's why you saw the presence and the reaction that both the school district and the South Hampton Village Police Department did on Monday. My observations, again, I'm proud of our police department chief, Tom Cummings. Your department, of course, was a great presence. Very professional. It exemplified exactly what departments are for. In situations like that, and as much as we don't, that's the world we're in nowadays, and certainly what happened in Florida punctuated that, in addition to all the other events throughout the years. It showed that our department, and proudly, we are highly trained. They showed how well they interacted with the community, because let's face it, we have our own children and family members and so forth. They're in the same school system, so we all have skin in the game. We're all concerned. Showing that they're well-trained, well-capable to, unfortunately, if they have to act upon, they're ready to go. And that was good to see. More importantly, what I was happy with was the reaction of the people. I saw the reaction when they let the kids out of high school. It's a little different, they're older. Intermediate school, the release of students, again, a little different, they're older. Where I saw a lot of interaction mainly was the elementary school, because now you have younger children who are being picked up by their parents and so forth. And it's an interesting scene, no doubt about it, watching a police officer in full body armor and a long rifle weapon, several of them, standing around the school building. But was very, very encouraging, because I wanted to see how people react. At this point, people knew what was going on. The people knew what was going on. The families walking by, and I stood by a lot of the officers and the sergeants as talking with them, and I spoke to parents, and they all walked by with the children and thanked the officers for being there. And I also saw a couple people who weren't involved in school. I had children in the school walking by. Again, so I'm standing next to an officer in full tactical armored gear, and not even asking anything, which I thought was just as odd, because that's, I'd be compelled to ask what's going on if I saw that. But I also think that's the situation, it's the world we're in, where people have become desensitized to this, good or bad or indifferent. It is what it is. So, again, hats off to our department for the investigative work that it did and how it reacted and implemented to protect our community and our children, which is huge. And I also thank the community itself for how they reacted and how they supported the department. And thankfully, it was not something that developed into anything, but in this day and age, we can't take any chances. So, again, a hell of a week for public service, volunteers, and paid. Very busy. So thanks to all of them, and thank you to our community for their support. So,
Thank you, Rich. Thanks for the comments. Bill?
I have one comment, Wayne, that I want to address to you. Several people contacted me in the last week or so about a situation that they thought was troublesome, and the legalities of it all are really beyond me. But I wanted to tell you about it and ask you to look into it and take any actions that you think are appropriate. But they were concerned that the chairman of the Architectural Review Board and the historic advisor had met with an advisor to the Makamoto application, and that the other board members were not aware of it or so, or part of it. And they felt that this could get the village in trouble, and you might even see a situation where it was demanded that the chairman recuse himself from voting on it, and so on. All legal situations that I really don't know the answer to. And I thought that I wish you would look it over and maybe contact Mr. Leventhal, the attorney for the Ethics Board, and run it by them to make sure that they didn't do something improper that will bite us. And I'd hate to see a decision made on this and then find out that this emerges and becomes a problem. And if it's not a problem, the ball's in your court, and I'm not, I'm concerned, but maybe I shouldn't be. I don't know, but it's a legal situation, and I wish you would take control of it and do whatever is called for.
I'll look into it and get more information. It's the first I'm hearing of this. So.
Yeah, no, these were very sensible people, and some with legal backgrounds and all that sort of thing, and they thought that something had happened that shouldn't have happened, and I'm just going to put it in your lap, and maybe I think Leventhal might be interesting to talk to. But anyhow, enough said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I'd just like to thank Rich again, because I was off in Utah visiting my grandchildren, and we had the Northeaster and the lockout at the school, and I'd like to thank the police department for their quick and responsive actions at the school. It's been mentioned, or referred to as extreme actions, and I just want to stress that when it comes to our children, our schools, there is no extreme action. That everything that is said is taken very seriously, and I thank again the police department for the quick responses to it. Also, the highway department was terrific in cleaning up the beaches. I'm not quite sure where all these stairways come, but you could, talk about a multi-floor house. You could, redo the entire house with all these stairways. There's got to be a secondary market on these things, because they're everywhere. But they did a great job in collecting all that stuff, as did the fire department, as Rich pointed out, on the rescue. Again, being away, I was getting these constant texts on my cell phone, and one of them was a great photo of our brush truck going through waist-deep water to reach this guy stranded in his little sedan out at the golf links. But on much brighter notes, great village. We got a lot of activities going on, and there's all sorts of things going at the various cultural arts organizations, from Southampton Cultural Center to SAC, and I'll just mention a couple of them. Southampton Cultural Center will open its Center Stage production, and Center Stage, if you haven't gone and seen it, well worth to go to see one of their plays. They have a production of Beauty and the Beast coming up tomorrow, and performances will be running through March 25th. What I've been told is that tickets are selling really quickly, so you certainly should reserve your seats as fast as you can. My first experience with Center Stage in one of their productions really was over Christmas. I had to dress up. I find myself dressing up a lot in this job. I've been Ninja Turtles and polar bears, and there I was serving cookies, so I stayed for the performance of Charles Dickinson's, and it was absolutely spectacular. I can't endorse their shows more than that. They're well worth seeing. And then at Rogers Memorial Library, they're holding their juried expedition and postcard contest. So if you got a photo or artwork that depicts Southampton as home sweet home, send it in. You never know. Entries will be accepted through March 15th, and the winner will be chosen on March 22nd. Artwork will be displayed during the month of April. I'm sure that there's people out there that have some great photos or pictures of Southampton, and that would be great. Southampton Arts Center, SAC, has many activities taking place this month, including an exhibition of Radical Voice 23 Women. They'll also be showing a documentary, Step, on Friday night as part of their Best of the Feast series, which takes place every Friday night. You know, I think you have a movie series every Friday?
Yeah, this particular one is called Best of the Fest, and they're pulling films that have won or been nominated at different festivals throughout the country.
And great to catch a movie on Friday night, and on Saturday there'll be a live jazz concert in the theater. So, you know, Southampton is a very special place, and we continue to put on these exhibitions, and you really should take advantage of it, because I think you'd be impressed by them, and I got to tell you, I think you'll be going every Friday night and going every play at SCC. So, and that's all. Any other?
Can I say one more thing?
Yep.
Should have made this comment about 2 months ago when it happened, and I don't think anybody else ever. I haven't missed any meetings, so I know you knew Warren Hamer died here about 2 months ago, and he truly was a special person, and different in many ways, but unbelievable guy. And I think he was something like 97 years old or so, and he truly was pride of the fleet type of stuff. And he was served on, what was it, the planning board for?
He served, and you know, I mean, in his passing, everybody deserves a sort of funny story. And when Warner stepped off of the planning board, he continued to come in. There was a vacancy here, and he continued to come into the planning board. And I was always so concerned, because I'd see him walk in, and then he'd start walking up to get in his seat, and I'd be like, no. And then I think we filled the seat, and he still came in and watched every planning board meeting, and he still would sort of wander up towards his seat, and I was going, oh no, what are we going to do here? But he was truly a great gentleman and a terrific, special guy. And I think he was in the Navy for a number of years, and very proud of it. And it was his service to the village of Southampton was pretty spectacular. And certainly, you're right, we're all going to miss him. And truly a character. He would talk with a raised voice that would be, he would shake the whole auditorium.
Yep.
And you know, on the receiving side, I'm not sure he heard an awful lot, but he had great opinions, and truly a be missed. With that, any further comments? Any other public comments?
I believe we got one coming up.
Hi, this is Bonnie Cannon, 54 Miller Road, Southampton, New York. My first comment is that I did not have an opportunity to get here when you all were talking about the monies that would be utilized for the park, for the proposal for the park. And I just wanted to put on record that my comment is that I would like to see if those monies, if we're going to utilize those monies for recreation, to make sure that we're looking at the teens and the preteens and the things that they may be wanting to do versus just the park that we have there. The other thing that I would ask you to consider as well is that we have plenty of tennis courts around that are owned by the village, but we don't have any basketball courts. At Prentice Park, we used to have a basketball court there. That park is no longer there. At one point in time, there was land that was purchased right next to 7-Eleven that was supposed to be deemed for the community that was close over there, and there were supposed to be basketball courts that were put there. That was never done. So if we're going to do any type of parks or put any types of things for recreation, I would ask for you to look to include some basketball courts, because I don't believe that there are any that exist that we have in the village right now, and the ones that were taken away. That was the first thing. The second thing is that the U.S. Open, I believe, is coming to town this year, and my issue or my question and my hope is, I know that there was a job fair that was done in East Hampton, the town of East Hampton, for the U.S. Open. I don't know if anyone has looked at doing anything here in the village of Southampton, but certainly since they are coming to Southampton, I think that the village and the town should be doing things in which our residents can take advantage of the opportunities, and we should be at the forefront of any types of jobs or things that are available. All of our businesses, the Chamber of Commerce should be intact with the U.S. Open, and there should be some type of strategy or something. They shouldn't just come to our town and we not be involved in getting our people involved in taking advantage of any opportunities that come along with the U.S. Open coming to the town of Southampton. And then thirdly, as far as I know, Trustee Hattrick, you had talked about the ARB. I believe that does not the ethics board, do they not have an attorney that sits on
Yeah, I mentioned him too. That's who I was talking about. This Mr. Leventhal is the attorney for the ethics board. Then run it by him so that you don't get into a real messy situation down the road. If there's a problem, do something about it. If there's not a problem.
Has a complaint been submitted?
In regard to?
In regard to the issue that you're talking about.
I just know some, I think.
Okay.
No, not formally. No.
Okay, because I think
complaints
that,
are made to me.
Right, and I think maybe it would be better just from my process to go with the process so that you also don't get yourself in trouble, and to also let individuals, if they have a complaint, to tell them to go through the process and submit their complaint through the ethics board. Let the ethics board do what the ethics board was commissioned to do, and then if you have any issues regarding that, but to circumvent that without even a complaint being submitted with the ethics board, I think that you also may be looking at possibly, some type of issues as well. That's why we have the processes and things put in place in our boards and our attorneys and things and that sort. And I would ask that you, continue to at least let the process go before we circumvent or do something else other than the process. And I think that basically was all of my comments that I wanted to talk about the park, the U.S. Open, that you had mentioned this. And then lastly, we have many pieces of land here within the village. I know that J.D. Singh had talked about the need for affordable or next generation housing. I would certainly encourage the village board to continue to look at not even places within the village, but even some of our own village land to see if those pieces of plots of lands can be utilized for affordable housing and next generation housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Just to address a couple of your comments, because I know Nancy is so geared up and working so diligently on the parks, and we've made, I think, some very good progress on it. We do have, in next year's budget, we have allocated funds for the park. we've met with Rogers Library, and we've gotten some great feedback from a number of individuals on addressing the issue of the older kids in the park. And it seems that the older generation is very geared towards socializing, which we see today on all their Facebooks and their internet connections. And the library indicated up at the library they put out a board so that they could write on the board what they would like to see in a park. And I mean, there were some great comments, but the majority of the comments were an area for them to socialize. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting is like they love free rides. You know?
Free ride?
Yeah, it's that little
thing.
Yeah. They all talked about free rides, how great it is. So, you know, when Nancy gets back and we're going to get together and we're envisioning adding to the park, probably reducing some of the equipment in the park, but putting in a gazebo-style building that you can see through, but it would have internet access and battery chargers and stuff in it. Yep. You'll have to come forward because Charlie needs you.
I also like your point about basketball, because that's going to put a lot of different conversations, because nothing like grabbing a quick pickup game here and there.
Yeah, that's the only thing that I wanted to ask. I mean, you have an entire SYS center, and they have an entire league for, you know, those that are small all the way up. And I mean, every Saturday you have guys, you have the little ones all the way up playing basketball. I just think it's a shame that we as a village don't have any, you know, basketball courts. So I just would look, you know, I think that that's a valid thing to look at is placing some basketball courts somewhere within the village. We have plenty of tennis courts.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
you know, we will take a look at basketball courts. You know, right down in the village proper, it's a little tough because of the sound. And over on Moses Lane, we've been reached out by a number of people that, you know, the basketball courts aren't necessary, but what they really want to see is more open space, walkways where people can get out and enjoy the vistas in the open areas. So, you know, and that was the whole point of bringing those projects public, is so that we could get input on what the individuals and the people really want, as opposed to just jumping into it. So we're definitely going to both those change, and certainly consider basketball also. Then your second issue is with, I'm trying to remember what your second issue.
U.S. Open.
Oh, U.S. Open. That's right. U.S. Open, Julie and I and Steve have been meeting with the guys from the U.S. Open, Charlie, and the interesting thing with the USGA this year is that in 2004, they really didn't reach out to the village. We've talked to them. We've also talked to Mr. Pickett, that's the president up there at Shinnecock. And this time, they're making a conservative effort to reach out to the village. American Express is helping a lot of the retail operations and have promotional materials for them. We're also setting up a sort of a, I guess it was the fall festival style event in Lake Agawam area. And they have reached out to, I don't think they've reached out to the youth, but they have reached out, I think, to the golf clubs for volunteers.
Well, not just the golf clubs. What the USGA does every time they have, because again, speaking with Charlie about this last time we were talking with them, is every time they have any event, US Open or any golf, everybody you see roaming around that, or let me say, a vast majority, they're volunteers. So not a lot of people, when they grab the local community, they're not getting paid for being there. Especially like when it's golf-related stuff. The drivers, the shuttle, the people ushering and moving those ropes and carrying the signs. Well, that's different. I said, but the people where they reach out to, volunteers, are mainly what they're doing. Now, it's catering their facilities, I don't know how much they're reaching out to. They bring a lot in, obviously, because they have an organization, but I think, you brought up something about reaching out to youth and so forth, but a lot of what they do is based on volunteerism, because everybody just wants to be part of it. So that is a huge part of where they get there. And then when you mention golf clubs, they mention because I'm a USGA member, and then that's where they reach out to members of that, say, hey, if you're interested, and there's people started applying, and even I'm members for volunteer positions in advance of a year ago. So that's pretty standard with every thing. But it's a point as far as where they're grabbing those things from. I don't know, but that's why, as the mayor said, they learned a few opens ago to get more involved with their local community. Case being, they're domiciled in the village. They have their home office here. They opened about a year ago. They never used to do it last time they didn't do that. But that's a business model they've been doing with every community. They learned it worked. So that's why they wanted to, I think, if not so much on the course itself, or part of that is bringing it into the village, like that event the mayor's talking about, and which is actually going to be using local vendors, kind of like a September Fest is what I've been explaining to people. So if you're interested, and people are interested, that is a work, and then probably Julie can elaborate more, that is a work in progress. They came to us to secure the venue and the location. What happens after that, it's still being, so there's time for that, I think, to be part of that. I don't know, am I speaking out of turn on that, or is that?
No, their processes, they put out an RFP for people to run the entire event, because it would be large, and then I think their hope is that then once that happens, and they would try to get local vendors, if they're going to have food vendors or artists or whatever,
Sure.
that they could try to incorporate the local vendors as well. And that's my understanding.
I know that is their goal first and foremost.
Yeah.
And then on Bill's issue, I make it a strong habit not to comment on active applications, but now that we know of the issue, we'll certainly take a look at it. Any other comments?
You good?
Okay, if there's no further comments, I make a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing legal issues.
Second.
Second? Aye, aye.